So that said, you'll realize that one of the biggest factors that might have put you off when you were preparing the GRE was vocabulary. So let's look at that. Let's look very closely at vocabulary itself, and more importantly, let's see why it's important. Right? So look at this question. What I want you to do, of course, is a text completion question. What I want you to do is, before we go into the answer options, I want you to figure out what word could fill this particular blank. Take about 40 to 50 seconds or even a minute to solve this. Once you're done, type out your predictions. I don't want to know what the answers are, right? Don't worry about the answers. Rather, tell me what word should fill in here. And we'll have a discussion about it and figure out how to take it from there. Forget about the answer options. Well, you're very likely to get it wrong. That's the point here. You are very likely to get the predictions right, though. I want to find out what your prediction for the word to fill this up is. Forget about the answer options here. Don't worry about that. I want your own word. And you'll remember that this is part of the process of solving these question types. Unworthy, okay? But it says, but the sentence clearly says that although worthy of attention, it is worthy of attention. So unworthy is a direct contradiction of that, don't you feel? So we need some other word. So you're right in that it's not something that should be given too much attention for. So what is that thing that the author gives too much attention for? Extra, well, yes. Can you pick up a word from the sentence itself? Which word means which word from the sentence, from right here, does he think is not necessarily relevant? Characters clothes, very good. Very good. So characters clothes. So essentially your prediction here could be such cloth related concerns, right? Or you could say relevant, but then he does say it's worthy of attention. So not so relevant, irrelevant. Let's just go with that then. Clothes related or irrelevant concerns. We can use both of those, right? So the next step is to look at the answer options. Of course, let's look at them. Let me just clear that out. Okay. So we want clothes related or irrelevant. Let's look at the answer options. Any guesses? Let me just put out a quick poll. A lot of you have gone with syntactical and irrelevant. Fair enough. D. Okay. Fair enough. So let me come back to the sentence, right? Irrelevant here is a trap. And that's why I sort of entertained that guess. Notice how it says, although worthy of attention, right? If something is worthy of attention, then you wouldn't call it irrelevant. It's a little too harsh, don't you think? Instead, it's something that is not worthy of complete attention. It's something that is not the most important thing. And that is not irrelevant, right? So irrelevant is too extreme and is therefore eliminated. Right? So what happens is when you do not know the meaning of some words, you end up picking the one that you're familiar with. That's not the right way to go though, right? So we can safely eliminate C. Didactic means to instruct. For example, if before you start a GRE passage, you're likely to see a didactic text that tells you exactly what to do and what your goal in that question type is. Instructional text is didactic. So that has nothing to do with clothes. Syntactical, like in a syntax, you know what that is. In programming you have syntax, and grammar you have syntax. A set of rules, a guideline, right? That has nothing to do with clothes either. Frivolous is to lack seriousness. Now you could say, well, he is concerned about frivolous things, but then again, it doesn't mean clothes. Again, when you're not very sure of the words, you end up very likely to pick an answer option that you think could be the right thing, right? But rather, the right answer here is sartorial. Sartorial directly means related to clothes, and as you predicted, it's the most obvious, most direct answer right there. The problem, of course, is that these words might as well have been in Japanese, for all I care, because these words are not words that you've come across in your everyday life. And that's one of the biggest challenges about the GRE, that you come across words that you've never, or rather you are given or you're asked words that you've never come across in your everyday life. So that's one thing you need to watch out for. So even though breaking down the sentence was quite obvious, the answer options can be quite tricky, right? So that's one of the reasons why vocab building is very important. Second, this is a sentence equivalence question. So let me work with you on this, right? And so you'll also sort of learn how to work with these vocabulary-based questions from a strategy perspective. So the sentence says, always circumspect. So the word circumspect, where is that notification? Okay, so why not frivolous? Well, frivolous means lacking seriousness, and that doesn't necessarily sentence says. So to go back to the previous slide, we realized that the key was that it was related to the clothes of the character, right? Frivolous may work, right? But it's not the most specific answer here. Remember, you need to answer based on the information provided in the sentence itself. And the only information we know about this particular concern that he has is that it's related to clothes. And sartorial directly means that. Right? So this is exactly why you need to follow process. You need to be able to predict based on information given and not based on intuition. Right? If you go by intuition, you will probably pick up in irrelevant or frivolous because they both make sense, but they're not accurate in this context. So let's go to the next one. So the question is, always circumspect, she was reluctant to make judgments, but once arriving at a conclusion, she was something in its defense. So what is the target? What is the blank here talking about? It's about the conclusion she arrives at, right? How is she in its defense? What do we know about this conclusion? Well, we know that she is very reluctant to make judgments. And we also know there's a trigger word called but. So she's very reluctant or hesitant to make judgment. She hesitates or is very shy to come out with her own opinion. But when she does come out with her opinion, how is she in its defense? Can someone tell me what could fill this blank? Forget about the answer options. What word of your own could fill this blank? How was she in its defense? Was she judgmental in her defense? That doesn't seem right. So we know that she was reluctant. So look at the word reluctant. That's your key here. She was reluctant to make judgments. But when she did make a judgment, how was it in its defense? Did she defend it? How did she defend it? Did she defend it at all? Or did she defend it quite strongly? She was very confident, right? She was quite strong, absolutely, because the word but there suggests that a contrasting idea is taking place, a contrasting cause and effect is taking place there. Absolutely, right? So we need a word which means strong in its defense. Take a few seconds to go through the answer options. You need 2 right answers, mind you. Take a few seconds. I will release a poll where you can put out your answers. Remember, there are 2 right answers here. Yes. So what you'll realize is the most trending answers here, if you can call it that, are intransigent and resolute. But look at the word intransigent. Trans is to move. Intransigent is unmoving, to be stubborn, right? Whereas resolute is to be very strong-willed, to not waver in your beliefs. It's a very positive word. Intransigent can be negative in some contexts. Stubborn, very strong, very reliable, right? By themselves, if you look at the definition, they mean very different things. They mean very, very different things. But in context, when I put them back in the sentence, you'll realize that they mean very similar things in context. And that's what matters on the GRE. And you're right. Intransigent and resolute are the right answers. Very good. So what do we learn from this? Well, that context is what matters. Definition Well, not really. If you're going to spend your time memorizing definitions, you're not going to have a good time on the GRE because it really does not test definitions. Since we're here, let's look at the other answer options. Differential. Have you heard of this statement? She gives a lot of differential treatment to the new employees. Right? Differential meaning different in the sense that you are partial towards them, something that's very different from what's normally given to others. So partial means differential. Lax is like the word relaxed. Very good, yes, biased. Lax means very similar to relaxed. So lax is without a strict follow-up of things. To be very relaxed and laid back is lax. Negligent, well, similar to the word negligence or neglect, to not pay attention to almost a criminal degree. Well, I'm being a little exaggerating here, but to not necessarily be very concerned about important things, to be negligent. Obsequious is, well, the root here is sequer, similar to sequence, and well, a sequence follows, right? Obsequious is when someone sort of blindly follows, or sheep, like a sheep, follows someone else without questioning and without having their own thoughts. Obsequious, to be slavish, to be slavish. I can't think of a better word right now, right? So does that make sense? Do these answer options make sense? Because remember, on the day of the test, you are not looking for synonyms necessarily, and you're not expected to choose based on definitions, but rather context. Dogmatic, Kamal, is a very different, it's used in a very different context because it means to be opinionated or basically strongly supporting your opinions or beliefs, usually used in contexts of politics and religion. So those don't necessarily make sense in this context, right? Let's make a prediction and then go to the answer options and see how those work, right? So the prediction here should be for the sentence. For some time now, something has been presumed not to exist. Well, the explanation for that is that the cynical or the pessimistic conviction that everybody has an angle is considered wisdom. So what does this figurative phrase, everybody has an angle, mean? Anybody? Absolutely, very good. Everybody has a very different, their own opinion or own point of view. In other words, no one is going to be, well, unbiased, right? Everyone is biased towards something. So if it is common knowledge or it's considered wisdom that everybody has a bias, then what has been presumed not to exist? If everyone is biased, what does not exist? Perhaps lack of bias? So what I want you to do is, that is your prediction, lack of bias or own opinion, right? That is what has been missing. So with that in mind, go to the answer options, eliminate as many as you can. Let's discuss what the answer should be. Again, in about a few seconds, I will release the poll for it. Okay. That's an even split between or among flexibility, indifference, and disinterestedness. So look at flexibility. Flexibility means having, being able to change, being able to be flexible. Well, that has nothing to do with opinion per se, right? Or lack of opinion. In fact, I would say flexibility has nothing to do with being unbiased. And for that reason, I would say that it's out of scope. Get rid of it. Flexibility and not having an opinion are not the same things. It's out of scope. Diffidence. Diffidence is sort of the opposite of the word confidence. You could think of it that way. To lack confidence in self, to be shy, right? That does not mean lacking bias. That's out. Looking at the other two answer options, rationality is actually a trap. It's quite interesting to see that very few of you have selected rationality. Because a lot of people would think, you know what has, you know, if you're not having a bias, then if you're biased, then you're irrational. That's many people's perspective, but that's not the truth. Bias and rationality or irrationality are very different things. The sentence is not talking about irrationality, but rather bias, and therefore rationality is out. Similarly, insincerity is also out because we're not talking about being insincere or cheating. but rather that you are biased towards something. Only the word disinterestedness makes sense. So it asks me, what does this word mean? Doesn't it mean not interested? Well, the word uninterested means that. On the GRE, disinterested is tested with one specific meaning, which is not having vested interest, or in other words, not being biased or partial. For instance, a disinterested judge is going to be a very good judge because he is impartial to all the people involved, right? So disinterested is to be differentiated from uninterested. It means to be impartial or unbiased. Make sense? And this is the right answer for this question. So again, the point here was that, the point here in the previous question was that, you may be very sure of the words, you may be very clear about the words you have, but sometimes you're likely to be thrown a googly in that you will see a word that you know, but a secondary meaning would be tested that you're not aware of. And that will lead you to make some really bad assumptions, which will lead to, well, wrong answers. Let's try this out. The plan which the engineers said would save the aquifer, so aquifer is a water body, by reducing pumping to some kind of levels, has passed a governmental environmental review, but faces opposition from outdoor and environmental groups. So I want you to make your prediction here. So remember, the step is always to first make a prediction here and then evaluate the answer options, right? Don't do it the other way around, because you're very likely to make mistakes if you do it the other way around. It is a tricky test. Trust me on that. So try it out. Once you're done, don't give me the answers. I'll release a poll. You can answer there. But in about, try it out. Once you're done, just let me know if you're done. So they want to reduce it to some kind of levels. That's the target here. Why? Because they want to save the aquifer. And what is implied here is that they are harming the aquifer by pumping too much. So they want to reduce the pumping to a level that does not harm the aquifer anymore. So harmless is the best prediction, I think, to be made. So let's look at the poll, match that prediction with your answer options, and let's see. Again, remember, this one requires 2 answer options, not just 1. Okay. Remedial is a trap. Minimal is also a trap. I don't think that got registered in the poll. Well, the thing is, think about it. Minimal would suggest that it's a very small amount, but do we know that it's harmless? We don't. Maybe even a minimal amount could be harmful. We are not sure. The context suggests that it has to be harmless. Minimal does not mean harmless. So that's eliminated. Practicable and feasible are also traps. These are viable or levels to which you can possibly pump. But ideally, if you pump to practicable and feasible levels, it would harm the aquifer. It would be efficient for the pumping, not for the aquifer. So that's traps, those are traps as well. Well, remedial is a trap because, well, you're not going to fix anything by reducing your pumping to a low level, right? You're only trying to prevent harm, not fix something. Remedial is to fix things. That does not make sense. It's innocuous and benign, which means harmless. That's the right answer. So what you have realized is there are a lot of traps here. Feasible, practicable, minimal, innocuous, and benign. They're all very close. And you will be asked to pick among those really close answer options on the day of the test. So it is very important to make a very precise prediction. It's also very important to know the mild differences between words and make choices based on that, right? That's pretty much it. So one of the questions is, should we eliminate or choose right answers? Always on the GRE, look for eliminating wrong answer options, because if you're trying to choose right answers, you are very likely to fall for certain intuitive biases. You're likely to choose an answer option that sounds nice or goes with your gut rather than what the method itself allows, right? So always try to eliminate as much as possible what you're left with, even though it seems very improbable, will be the right answer. Okay. So for a sentence equivalence question, you must spend no more than 1 minute per question. For a text completion question, depending on the complexity, you could spend anywhere from 45 seconds for a single blank to up to 1.5 to 2 minutes on a triple blank, right? It is entirely dependent on the context. So on average, I would say about 1.5 minutes per question, on average. So how do you build vocabulary? Well, what are the things you need to know to develop your vocabulary? Number one, start early. Don't put off vocabulary building for the last minute, not the last week, not the last month. Start as early as possible, right? Because this is long-term memory building, and it has to be meaningful and something that is retained in your mind for a long period of time. For that, you need a lot of time to build it. Maintain a separate notebook for vocabulary. What that means is that you should not just rely on an app to learn your words. Instead, you should physically have a notebook where you write the words and the definition and whatnot, which I will talk about. So this ensures that you're spending time with the word, doing research, actual research, not just doing it superficially. And all these will ensure that you learn the word properly and understand the context in which it is used. And you might think that, you know what, that will take a lot of time. I don't have that kind of time. Well, you don't have to spend too much time. So work on vocabulary consistently. So consistency is more important than number of hours within a short period of time. Work about 4 days a week, 30 minutes a day, right? And spend this 30 minutes a day studying 6 to 7 words in that 30 minutes. That's enough. The resources I will talk about in a few minutes will help you learn a variety of words, and that will ensure that you retain them as well in a very logical and a systematic manner in your head, right? It will also be a very entertaining way to do it. I'll talk about it when the time comes. Build vocabulary in context. Don't mug up definitions. Rather, you need to understand how a word is used, whether it's positive, negative, neutral, how positive, negative, or neutral it is, what kind of register it is. Is it formal, informal? All this is information that's very important when you're attempting text completion questions. And spend 1 day each week testing yourself. Don't just go through the words again and go to the definitions and see what makes sense. Instead, look at testing yourself. Cover the definition. Try to guess or try to predict what the definition of a word should be. That is a much better way to test yourself and recall the meaning of a word and learn it. About GRE vocabulary resources, I will share them with you. I will show you what kind of resources are. Resources make sense. After the session, I will also send you sort of a care package with all these relevant materials that you can refer back to. All right, so what are these resources? Like you just said, ideally use word lists. Your word lists are good. I will send you a word list, and this word list will have about 300 words, and these are the most frequently used words and high impact words, right? Focus on those and build from there. That's the idea. Use word lists as checklists. Don't use them as a place where you learn the word itself. Don't memorize the definition in the word list. Instead, go and do research on those words. That's very important. Second, use vocabulary.com for context. That's a brilliant resource. I'll show you how it's used, but using that will ensure that you learn the usage of a word and how it's used in actual everyday sentences. There's a website called visualthesaurus.com, and that's a great way to learn related words. Again, I'll show you how that works, and family of words that are related to this. This will expand your horizons of vocabulary building quite substantially, because at the end of the day, your mind wants to make connections. And this website essentially gives you that opportunity to build connections with other related words. Third, learn words in groups. So when I said you are going to focus on these 300 plus words, you're also going to do something where you're going to clump up similar words into groups. Right? Again, I can send you a package with word groups as well. So what happens is that in English, for a particular concept or an idea, there are multiple words, up to even 10 to 20 words that describe very similar things. If you can clump them up together and sort of remember them as one unit, it becomes very simple for you to be able to make educated guesses. Even if you're not very sure of a word, you can still make an educated guess, worst case scenario, and get the question or the answer right. And that's very important. So word groups are a very useful tool to learn a volume of words meaningfully, contextually for the GRE. And of course, something called etymology, where this is the study of roots. I will show you examples of how this works. Again, I'll send you a list of such words and how to study them after the examples are described. And perhaps all these things are very useful to learn words in context, and you'll understand the meaning of the words. But you are very likely to come across situations where you're not able to recall the meaning of a word when you see it, right? You know the meaning, you know the idea it represents, but you just are not able to recall what its definition is. This is very common. What you want to do is create mnemonics. Mnemonics are memory tools or memory triggers. And if it's too hard for you to create memory triggers, you can use this website, mnemonicdictionary.com, that has user-generated mnemonics, which essentially are upvoted, and they're very useful for you to help remember words effectively. So how should your vocabulary notebook look? Well, you should have the word with the definition, and of course related words. It can be synonyms, it can be roots, it can be family words from visual thesaurus, but most important is that usage. Use vocabulary.com to find the actual usage of the word and write down one sentence or context that makes sense to you. So the word must make sense just by looking at the sentence. It should tell you whether it's a positive or negative word, in what kind of context it's used, right? So let's look at an example of that. So the word I checked on vocabulary.com is conscientious, right? It gives me a very good educational description of what that word is. Go ahead and read that. Not now, of course, when you use vocabulary.com. It's a very informative piece on how this word should be used or what it means. More important is when you scroll down, you will see this section, usage from actual published material. And you will see the usage of these words in such actual materials. What this does is it shows you how this word is used, more importantly, what it means, and how that meaning is conveyed in context. Find one. You will be able to scroll to multiple layers of such usages. Find one that works for you, that you're able to relate, and write it down in your vocabulary notebook. You'll realize how useful it is once you start doing it. We will address scholarships in a bit. Maybe in the Q&A section, we can dedicate some of the time to talk about that. Okay. This is visualthesaurus.com. Essentially, putting in a word there will help you understand family of words, and will sort of show you what words are exact opposites and related by family to these words. Similarly, you can research on various other words to learn a lot of related words. It's a great tool. I urge you to check it out. So when we do send the resources, I'll send you the links for these as well. And this is mnemonicdictionary.com, where things are voted based on popularity, and the best mnemonic or explanation of how to remember is on the top, right? So do check it out. If you're stuck, if you're not able to recall the meaning of a word consistently, then use a mnemonic to remember it better. So sure, use your app, but the thing is, if you're using that, only using that to learn and remember the word, it will be it may not be very effective. Like I said, contextual meaning is very important. If you're not able to recall that, if you're not able to understand the contextual meaning, then you will not find that time that you've spent as productive. What's the point if you do spend time with it, but it's not usable on the day of the test? So even if you're using the app, make sure you have a vocabulary notebook where you write down things and find actual usage, not just like dictionary.com definitions, but actual usage from vocabulary.com. And this is very, very useful. And you'll realize that your accuracy substantially improves as you start learning the contextual usage of words. Etymology is essentially the study of the roots or origin of words in the English language, right? Why is this study important? Well, it actually isn't, but to understand the science behind how a word originates is useful, because a lot of words are connected, and knowing the base forms can help you remember and recall words very, very effectively. And I will demonstrate that with a few examples. So to look at the basics, you have three forms or three things in etymology. You have the prefix, suffix, and basis. So the prefix comes before, suffix comes later, base is the core word itself. For example, if you look at the word impeccable, the word impeccable means without even one flaw, to be unblemished. For example, if I sell my phone in impeccable condition, it will get the best price possible. looking at the roots, im means without. In this case, it means without. Pekka means fault. There's a word called peccadillo or peccable, which means with flaws. Peccadillo means small flaws, or a white lie is a peccadillo, a small sin. Able is able to. So when something is impeccable, you're not able to find even one flaw, right? So that's what it means. Second, disingenuousness. This, not. In could either mean not or excessive amounts of. For example, if something is flammable, it can burn. If something is inflammable, it will burn quite briskly. In this case, it means excessive amounts of. Genuous means to be, well, it's similar to the word genuine, it's to be very frank. So ingenuousness is to be very frank. Disingenuousness means to be, well, disreputable, to be a cheat, right? Makes sense? That's how the roots work. Let's look at a few examples and take things from there. So this is a very, very fun way to learn words, and also a very useful and effective way to learn words. So the root here is loqui, which means to talk. Loquacious, O-U-S, is to be full of a particular quality. Loquacious, therefore, means to be talkative. Eloquent, EU, the root, means to be fined or fine. Eloquent, therefore, is to be very persuasive in your speech, is to talk very fluently, right? Soliloquy, solo, is single or self. You must be aware of that. So soliloquy, therefore, could mean what? Well, it means to talk to oneself. Monologue, on the other hand, is a single speaker. So when someone speaks for a very long time and they're the only one speaking and no one else interacts, it's a monologue. Like a lecture, it's a monologue. A dialogue is when more than two people are involved, or two or more people are involved in conversations, when everyone discusses ideas. The word grandiloquent and magniloquent have roots which show that they are grand or pompous or over the top. And that's what it means. To be grandiloquent or magniloquent means to be very flashy in your use of language, to use very big, bombastic words, to use language that is very over the top, right? The key is to, well, the key is they're trying to be, a show-off. 1 second there, yeah. Colloquial is to be, well, cool, like a co-worker. Colloquial means to talk with someone who is your equal, right? Colloquial. So you're informal, you're casual in the way you speak. Obloquy, ob is against, like obstruct is against. Obloquy is to talk against someone, to publicly denounce someone. Obloquy. Somniloquy, like the word insomnia. Well, insomnia is the lack of sleep, you're not able to sleep. Som means to sleep. So somniloquy is to sleep talk in a sense, right? So what you realize is that just by looking at this word or root loqui, you're able to see quite a lot of words that are related to it. As a result, learning these words becomes very, very easy. For example, if I said soliloquy, you'll immediately make the connect with solo, which means one, single self, loqui, talk. So someone who talks to oneself, or to talk to oneself, is soliloquy. Grand and magna means big, bombastic, and therefore they mean to be show off, to use big, bombastic language.